All right back into it. So for this section, we're going to talk about stress theories and some of the major players in how we theorize and conceptualize stress at work. The first comes from Karasek in 1979, and it is known as the job demand control model, one of the most cited models or theories in IO psychology. And this theory basically posits that there are two factors that produce stress, and those are job demands and job control. And these work kind of on that same X and Y lines that a lot of our things have been on before, and it divides things and it divides basically majorly into four quadrants or four groups. And I'll show you how that works. So job demands are defined as workload or the requirements of the job. So whatever your job demands or requires of you, things like how much work you have to do, the type of work you have to do, the requirements of the job, a lot of the things that we went over in our job analyses in terms of tasks and KSAOs, those are our demands. Job control, as the name suggests, is autonomy in the job and discretion for using different skills. How much freedom do you have? How much choice do you have? Um, and so on and so forth. But remember that autonomy is important as an outcome and also as a resource to a lot of workers. So basically, this model says that how stressed and how much strain comes out is a result of the interaction between demands and control. So the worst situation to be in is when you have a lot of demands but very few controls. So what that looks like, and I will show you, is this, remember, four quadrants along these two lines. So control, high and low, demand, high and low. So let's start here and do the low, low. When you have low levels of control and low psychological demand, the job's very passive. It's almost, you don't even have to think about it. It's not hard, but it's not interesting. And you as a worker might be not very engaged and not really working that hard or productive, but you can still do the job. If you have high control but low demand in your job, so you have a lot of choice, you can do what you want, you have autonomy in your work, um, you're going to be in a low strain job. It's a job that you just find very easy to do. And then over here, if you have high levels of strain but low control, that's where you have high risk for psychological distress and physical stress as well. But then finally, this one here, if you have high control and high demand, this is a really active job, usually an interesting and exciting job, and oftentimes the type of job where you can enter into those positive flow states because your demands, but you're also, you have a lot of demands and strain, but you also have the resources or the control to deal with it. So these are usually the most coveted jobs. Of course, it's not that simple, and later theories came and expanded upon this model and added other factors, but this is the one that started it all. Another model another model that emerged for stress is this person-environment fit model, and it relates to more than just stress. But one thing to notice that is missing from the one we just talked about, job demands and control, is the person's perception. And remember, perception is everything in psychology. So fit, person environment fit, is kind of this idea that people make a judgment about the perception to which they fit into their work environment. And there are multiple types of PE fit. Person job fit, PJ, PG, which is group, person, those can be specific people you work with, person supervisor, and person organization. Most common, we talk about person organization fit, but all of these subfacets fit under this broad environment. We also refer to needs supply fit and demands ability fit. So what this means is that the organization needs something that the employee supplies and the employee needs something that the organization supplies. So in this case, it's usually the need supply fit is when the organization needs a specific skill, that employee offers that skill, and the employee needs to fulfill, their need for pay and to be able to have a sense of worth in the world because they're doing a job that contributes. And so the organization supplies those things for them. And that's when you have need supply fit. Demand ability fit, on the other hand, is more of a what does the job demand and what do you have as an ability and does it meet? And if you have a high perceived fit with your organization, you will find reductions in strain. I accidentally drew over that line. Um, so there are a lot of different sources that can influence how you perceive your fit based on your own personal preferences and your values and your abilities. It's also important to note this idea of supplementary versus complementary fit. And things like supplementary fit usually fall more into this like broader PE fit, or even like PO fit or PS fit, because those are things where it's like there's a match between the two. So your values match the organizations or the supervisors. And that is supplementary fit. On the other hand, complementary fit is when there's a difference between the two, but they complement each other. So that's going into that needs supplies or demands abilities fit. So fit literature gets a little bit complicated with all the different types, but the main thing you'll want to know is this broadly PE fit and what it is. Okay, I'm just going to move on to the next theory, which is conservation of resources theory, also referred to very simply as core theory. This is one of the most cited theories of psychology, specifically work and work stress psychology. The main idea of this is that humans are constantly striving to maintain resources and protect against loss of resources. Stress results from the threat or the actual loss of the threat of loss or the actual loss of any key resources. And also when there is failure to gain resources following effort. So those are the three ways you can be stressed, whether with losing resources, thinking you're going to lose resources, or when effort doesn't result in a gain of resources. What are resources? Well, based on this theory, they can be just about anything. Hobfall, the original author, originally defined 4 types. Object resources, so just things you have. Condition resources, so that can be just your states and your skills, things that are conditions of your situation. Personal resources, those are more actually the knowledge, skills, abilities. Conditions, on the other hand, is more like states that you're in. It can even be things like, are you married? Do you have kids? Just conditions of your life, whereas personal is that skills or abilities. Then finally, energies, which is kind of a little bit more difficult to define, but they talk about kind of just certain types of energy we have, and I think even included money as an energy and power. You don't need to know all that, but just basically understanding that pretty much anything, if you go by his definitions, can be categorized as a resource into one of these 4 categories. And this is what you need to know about core theory. The core tenet of core theory is that we want to obtain, retain, foster, and protect things that we value. So those are our resources. And there are 4 principles. The first one is the primacy of loss, meaning resource loss is more salient than resource gain. And you've probably noticed this in your life or heard this in some other terms. Basically what it means is we notice more when bad things happen than when good things happen. We notice more if we lose something than if we gain something. Principle 2 is resource investment principle. People must invest resources in order to protect resource loss, recover from loss, or gain loss. So you have to invest, you have to use up resources to gain resources, you have to use up resources to protect your resources, etc. Principle 3, the gain paradox principle. And that means that gain becomes more salient in the context of loss. So basically, when loss circumstances are high, gains become more important. When you're losing a lot of stuff, any little bit of gain will become more valuable than it might have been in a different situation. And finally, the desperation principle. which is when your resources are outstretched or exhausted, you would enter into a defensive mode to protect what's left of your resources, and you may become extra aggressive or irrational. Another thing to note about this theory that I didn't put in the slides is this idea of spirals. So you could enter into a loss spiral or a gain spiral, meaning that if you start losing resources, you tend to continue to lose more and more resources, and that's entering into a loss spiral. But the same thing can occur in the opposite way, the gain. So people who gain tend to continue to gain. Someone came to the door, sorry about that. So if you're losing resources, you're going to continue to lose resources. If you gain resources, you're more likely to continue to gain resources. And specifically these loss spirals tend to be really detrimental to people's psychological well-being. That's it for this section. And so I will be back in the next video. So just keep in mind these theories and be aware of them, because you might want to look back and cite them in some of your projects. All right.